Let's bring you the latest business news now here on France 24. We're going to start with the latest information about the mysterious disappearance of a famous Chinese financier. Our business editor, Charles Pellegrin, is with us here on set to tell us more about it, Charles.
That's right, Stuart. Bao Fan, the founder and chair of China Renaissance Investment Bank, disappeared this month and has been unreachable. This confirmed by a company filing from China Renaissance published last week. This Wednesday, the Financial Times citing 4 anonymous sources saying the banker, famous for brokering some of the biggest deals in the Chinese tech world, was preparing to move part of his personal wealth to Singapore in the months before his disappearance. This happening after one of the bank's executives, Cong Lin, was detained in September last year after being called in for questioning by the state regulator over alleged violations in the group's securities division. Singapore has become something of a haven for wealthy Chinese business people wanting to shield themselves from a tech crackdown in China. Indeed, this follows several high-profile episodes. First and foremost, the suspension of Ant Financial's IPO back in 2020 after founder Jack Ma made statements critical of the Chinese government. Ma didn't appear in public for months after that and now reportedly lives outside China. There was also the regulatory probe into ride-hailing firm Didi Chuxing, the equivalent of Uber in China, which led to the suspension of its IPO on the New York Stock Exchange in 2021. And entire sectors have been overhauled by the state regulator, whether it's the online education sector or the gaming sector, for reasons varying from public health or ideological concerns or even the country's demographic crisis. It remains to be seen whether this is the start of a restructuring process for China Renaissance. And in the United States, the Supreme Court heard arguments Tuesday in the case pitting the parents of a woman killed during the Paris terrorist attacks in November 2015 and Google about the liability of internet platforms. Google's algorithm is accused of promoting ISIS videos to some users on YouTube. What's in question here is a foundational internet law from 1996 called Section 230, which shields internet platforms from being held responsible for the content they host. The Supreme Court justices seemed wary of further defining the scope of this Section 230. Take a listen to Justice Alina Kagan.
This was a pre-algorithm statute, and, everybody is trying their best to figure out how this statute applies. The statute, which was a pre-algorithm statute, applies in a post-algorithm world. But I think what was lying underneath Justice Thomas's question was a suggestion that algorithms are endemic to the internet, that every time anybody looks at anything on the internet, there is an algorithm involved.
To Hong Kong now, whose economy was battered by the pandemic and its strict COVID regulations. Finance Secretary Paul Chan presented the 2023 budget this Wednesday. The government there will be giving more handouts to consumers to support the economic recovery. All adult permanent residents in the territory will receive a 5,000 Hong Kong dollar voucher. That's just under 600 euros. That's half of what was issued last year. The local economy is expected to grow somewhere between 3.5 and 5.5% this year after shrinking 3.5% last year. Paul Chen, nonetheless, remaining cautious about the prospects.
I remain positive that Hong Kong's economy will visibly recover this year, but the recovery is still in its initial stage and businesses need to regain vigour after being hit by the pandemic over the past 3 years.
And food giant Danone, also the world's largest yogurt maker, posted its results for 2022 this Wednesday. Sales growth increased more than expected on the back of soaring raw materials and energy costs, which were impacted on prices down the line. The operating margin of the group behind Evian and Activia also declining as a result of this inflation, with profits representing 12.2% of sales. Going forward, the group will be faced with the question of how much further it can raise prices before consumers turn away. Let's take a look at some of the markets now. European indices opening lower this Wednesday, looking ahead to the latest minutes from the last Federal Reserve meeting. See the DAX in Frankfurt and the Paris CAC 40 down just under 0.2%. Main concern there about possible interest rate hikes. And Starbucks is launching what could perhaps be its most ambitious new product this Wednesday. This is an olive oil-infused coffee, and they're launching it in Italy, of all places. Chief Executive Howard Schultz is full of belief, saying, "In over 40 years, I can't remember a moment in time where I've been more excited, more enthused." Not sure how Italians will feel about this. There are only 20 stores in the country, and when Starbucks arrived in the scene in 2018, there were calls to boycott the chain. Starbucks hoping not to go the way of Domino's Pizza, who announced they were leaving the country last year. Stuart, Italians, rightfully so, very protective of their coffee traditions. Exactly. I don't know how they'll feel about this.
I'm interested to try it.